Stephane here today, and today he'll be talking about anatomy of a fast web component. So let me introduce you guys to him. He's a veteran UX engineer, design, dev unicorn with 20 plus years of experience on high-end customer products such as Encarta, Zune, Xbox, and Edge, using a range of technologies, native and web. Current technical focus is web components, accessibility, and design systems. Please give him a hand.
Hello. All right. So I've been doing this for a while. I'm more of a front-end specialist than a web specialist. I started doing web stuff back in the pre.com days. Then I went off and did all sorts of other native things, and I got back into web stuff in the mid-teens. I missed the whole bootstrap thing, completely passed me by. So now I work at Qualcomm and I'm doing design systems. But I just want to give you a really kind of introductory talk about fast web components and web components generally. So this is, so fast web components were developed by Microsoft primarily to use in Microsoft Edge and MSN. You might find them in some of the Copilot stuff. So if you go to an MSN page and you click on a card and inspect it, you'll see here's a web component. You can tell it's a web component because there's hyphens in the tag. And it's got a shadow root. Not all web components have shadow roots, but this one does. And you can see Microsoft Fluent web components are based on fast, and there's some other things out there. I will admit fast is a bit niche. It's Microsoft internal. So let's look at a quick introduction to web components. Who here has made a web component? So it's still a fair minority. So web components, if you look at MDN, are kind of based on three things: custom elements, shadow DOM, and HTML templates. The custom elements bit is really the essential part, because technically you can make a custom element without using shadow DOM. Some people are talking about that because it's controversial. And technically you could make a web component without a template. You could manually add the children via code, document create element and append child. But this is kind of the essentials of it. So if you look at, hit the wrong key. So using vanilla tech, this is an example from MDN. You can see that we declare a class, and the core bit is that your class extends HTML element. One of the things I love about web components is when you're developing in a web component, this period ID is actually the ID of the HTML element, right? You're actually working with the instance of the component, which means if you select the thing in the browser dev tools, you can actually see the properties that you assign to your component along with the properties of the element, which I think is excellent. So here we have a constructor, we get our template, and we attach our shadow DOM. And in the page, you have your template here, and then you can see the element is called my paragraph, and I'm using it in my page here. This is the example, not mine, actually. But this is kind of clunky. Like if you imagine as a web developer, like, how am I going to use this? It's not really portable, and especially if I want to share it to other people, do they have to embed the template in the page? Right? It's not ideal. So technologies like FAST and Lit from Google kind of provide some boilerplate to make it easier for developers to do their thing. So let's look at a basic fast web component. So this is my code. This can all be in one TypeScript page. I like TypeScript, but you can do this with JavaScript at regular vanilla if you want as well. So I import some stuff from fast element, and I declare my template as a variable. I declare a style sheet as a variable. Then I have this little custom element decorator, and I have my class. And my class is empty because I'm not doing anything. This is a dirt simple web component. It's dumb. So it just has styles, a template, and it gets declared. And then anywhere in my SPA, I can say my paragraph, and it will render this, and the shadow DOM will look like this. Right? Simple as pie. Really easy to do. So next thing you wonder, like, okay, what about properties and attributes? Because that's kind of essential, right? So this is another component, and there's a stack blitz for this, and I'll show you that later. I'll just get through it, and we can take a look at it and answer questions. So in addition to my paragraph, I'm going to have my timer. So in this case, I've kind of cut out some of the extra chaff of pulling in the classes, but importing stuff. But you can see I have my timer, and I have a template and styles, extends fast element, and I have attribute, and observable. So attribute is a decorator that fast uses, and it basically says, this thing is an attribute. So once I do this, in my markup, in my web page, and I use this component, I can just use it like an attribute for a regular HTML element. I can say instead of ID or style, I can just use initial and increment, which is the properties, the attributes I want my timer to use. Then there's also this other thing called observable. Observable is how reactivity works in fast. So anytime this property, this public property remaining changes, my function called remaining changed is going to get called. That's super convenient. I didn't have to do any setup. Just the fact that I declared this an observable, and I can have a function or not, the fact that this function exists means it gets invoked. If it gets invoked, we check to see if I'm connected. Right, we'll get into life cycle in a minute, because web components, there's a life cycle, and once they get added to the DOM, they're connected. Before they're added to the DOM, they're not connected, and if you try to make some function calls that invoke the DOM before it's connected, it will break. So you need to check if it's connected. So then I decide to do some stuff, right? And as I mentioned, this component has some life cycle events. So connected callback happens when the component is first connected. And you can see I have to call my superclass, the parent class, which is, in this case, fast element. So my timer web component extends fast element. So this connected callback will invoke the fast element's connected callback. And then I do my work, start timer or clear timer. And this is just basic boilerplate, stupid timer code that you may or may not like. Then I have a template. So you remember I said this remaining property is an observable. So in my HTML template, I can then have function calls like this. So x: x dot remaining, x is the instance of my component. So whenever x changes, it's going to render the value of x in my little panel div. And when x is less than or equal to 0, it will add an expired class to this div. And if you look at my style sheet, I have this panel class, which is green. And when it's expired, I switch to red. So you can see as the timer runs, as long as it's not expired, it's green. When it gets to the end, it's red. And this is just, it doesn't mean anything. It's just a way to show how easy it is to set up reactivity and to set up events. And there are other ways to do this. This is probably the simplest. I'm not going to go into the more complicated, better ways to do it, because that would involve explaining other things. All right, and the final thing I'm going to talk about is slots. So one of the cool things about web components is you can do layouts, and then you can have slots, and then elements can be assigned to slots. So you can see in this template, I have 3 slots. I have 2 name slots, title and timer. And I have another slot called it has no name, but its ID is content. So when I render this component, in my HTML page markup, I declare my section. Then I have a title, and I assign it to the title slot. And I need to put it in a span simply because you can't assign things to a piece of text, so you have to put it in some container. Then I assign my timer to the timer slot, which goes over here. And then my 2 paragraphs, which are not assigned to any slot, will get assigned to the default slot by default. So when I render it, it looks like this. Any questions so far?
Yeah, how does it re-render? Like how many, if the timer, if the value of x changes, how does it watch for the change, and what are the things that React actually solves is only that specific timer is re-rendering? Does it render the whole page?
No, it renders that. So this is even more micro-targeted than React.
Okay.
Right? This does not go through a virtual DOM. This is literally updating this specific thing. Or where's the content? You're looking at back at the timer here. No, here we're looking at the previous one. Right, so that's this. Right.
The rest is not re-rendered.
No, so it's specifically changing this. It will also touch this because both of these things are affected by the remaining property. Okay. Right. So, what's that?
It's like React. It didn't stop.
It's like React, but it's less overhead, right? It's more narrow.
I was thinking, is it more similar to signals or to observables, like kind of pipe operations?
So, one of the interesting things about FAST, philosophically, and I was on the FAST team at Microsoft when initially we did all these components for the first Chromium version of Edge as React components. Then people had issues with performance, and we said, okay, well, let's do web components. So we did V2 as web components. One of the philosophies is that FAST is intended to go away. Everything that FAST does is intended to be, we are filling in for things we expect the web platform to do eventually. So I believe there's a proposal for signals making its way through the W3C now. Theoretically, when that gets implemented, this observable system would get either replaced by or redirected to use signals, right? So I think one of the reasons I really like this approach is that the philosophy behind it is collapse the platform. I've been in this game a long time, and nothing annoys me more than getting good at a particular framework or development tool, and then like, well, Macromedia sold it to Adobe, and Adobe's killing it, right? So this way, you collapse the platform. The web platform itself is more stable than almost anything else we deal with, right? Like one of the great things about W3C is they hate breaking things, right? All right, anything else? Good.
Questions? Anybody needs a mic? Oh, Mike.
I don't have that much. This is the whole thing. I have the stacklets, but I can send you the stacklets afterwards.
Yeah, I just want to ask about server-side rendering, as I see like everything's like in the client side, so it's not supporting server-side rendering here.
So if you go to the FAST GitHub, you will see that they have a server-side rendering approach, right? Server-side rendering is very framework specific, right? So they have one. Will it work with your React one? Who knows? But it exists, right? It's and I agree it's complicated, but the technology is moving forward quite a bit. We have declarative shadow DOM now, so things that were not possible a couple of years ago are now becoming possible on that front.
Sure. So I've done lit and everything else in the past, and one of the concerns I always have with slots, other than it's hard to say, is that they're named with strings. Does FAST have solutions for that so that you don't accidentally use the wrong name? Right. So if you your demo.
Oh, you mean like TypeScript verification?
Something like that. I don't know. Like because
No,
in Angular in general, you had slots as in like actual components themselves. So it's very clear that the header slot was a header tag. So it's very clear what it is. But this one you showed you had to do slot equals string header, right?
Yeah, I mean, so it depends what you're doing.
But if you're making a library, it's harder to tell something.
right. So if you say in order to put something in the title slot, the user has to name it title, I don't think is that egregious.
No, I was just curious if there's a solution. That's all.
Yeah, I'm not sure that there is currently, like, is this a valid slot for this thing? I'm not sure we have a setup for that yet. It's a good idea, but I don't think it exists. And one of the things we do too is if you have components that are supposed to work together, like for example, I don't know, an accordion item going into an accordion, you can set the slot by default on the template of the child so it automatically puts itself in the right place, provided it's constant, right?
Yeah, I was looking at the code, and honestly, anybody who's worked with Angular, it looks so much similar to Angular's components. Like how you declare the template, then the decorators, and then you basically write.
So that model, like the code base template model, is really been around for a long time. Like it was, if you use things like XAML, Windows Presentation Foundation, you have your CSS or your C# or your C++ file and the template. If you look at a lot of the Microsoft internal stuff, it was, when we did Xbox, it was, you had a .xui file and a .c++ file, right? It was, so it's one of the reasons I like it. There's this approach to development called MVVM, model view. Did I get that right? Anyway, but this really applies well to that approach.
Cool. Yeah, just last question. I was actually talking to about this to you before, but for the audience, like, what's the difference between virtual DOM and shadow DOM?
So virtual DOM is a React construct, and I think there's some other libraries that have a similar thing. It's where your framework maintains a model of your UI, of your application or the page or whatever it is, in memory. And the framework makes changes to that model, and then it mediates rendering to attempt to do so efficiently. Shadow DOM is really like, I'm running out of power. Shadow DOM is is implemented by the web platform. It's implemented by the web browser. It gives you essentially a micro document that is isolated from the rest of your document so that CSS styles don't penetrate it, as well as some other things. The important thing to remember is that CSS variables do. The slow variable penetrates the shield. Had to get a Dune So, but yeah, and that's one of the reasons that I think web components work really well with design systems, is if your design system is populating design tokens as CSS variables, you can inherit those into your components pretty easily.
All right.
All right.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.